From Rails to Rockets, 100 Days Around the World Part 2. I'm going to see it for myself, a wonderful imaginary venture, and first time in the life. I have closed my eyes and venturing into a tour of the world, everything imaginary. This is a journey of the mind, body, and soul, a 100-day pilgrimage across continents, oceans, cultures, and frontiers of science and technology. Author Shri
Rajeev Shantalam Thatte.
Day 8. Taipei Lanterns Over Memory, 8th January 2030. Taipei, Taiwan. The flight from Seoul to Taipei was gentle, gliding over the East China Sea under soft clouds. As the plane descended, I saw a city cradled by lush green mountains and kissed by the Pacific breeze. Taipei looked both modest and mystical, as if it preferred not to boast, but to reveal itself slowly. At the airport, a young volunteer handed me a small red envelope with a welcome note and a sweet rice candy. "It's the season of the lanterns," she smiled. "Make a wish while you are here." I like that idea. Not everything had to be efficient. Some things could still be sacred. My first stop was the National Palace Museum, home to thousands of ancient Chinese artifacts, jade carvings, calligraphy scrolls, and porcelain teacups that once sipped through dynasties. The silence in the exhibition halls was rich, filled with unspoken reverence. Each object carried not just history, but a memory of hands and time. Later, I rode the sleek MRT to the heart of the city. Taipei 101, once the tallest building in the world, rose like a bamboo stalk toward the heavens. From its observation deck, I watched the city stretch in all directions, its alleys buzzing with scooters and the rooftops echoing with prayers from hidden temples. Yet Taipei is not only tradition, it's also a tech-savvy pioneer. At Nehu Tech Park, I visited a lab working on AI-driven eldercare systems, where sensors track the health patterns of aging citizens living alone. A researcher, Mr. Lin, explained how Taiwan was preparing for a grey tsunami, a rapidly aging population. "Our AI doesn't replace love," he said. "It just makes sure no one is forgotten." In a nearby office, another team was developing microrobots for spinal surgery. Using VR simulations and human-AI collaborative training models, precision met compassion in every project. But Taipei's magic came alive at sunset. As night fell, I joined locals in the Chiffon Lantern Festival, a tradition that turns sorrow into light. People wrote their wishes, regrets, or dreams on paper lanterns and released them into the sky from a quiet railway town outside the city. Mine read, "Let this journey soften my edges and sharpen my soul." I lit the candle inside, watched the lantern tremble, rise, and drift upward, carrying my words into the dark sky. Around me, Hundreds of lanterns glowed like floating prayers, casting golden reflections over the river. In my journal, I wrote, "Taipei does not shout to be seen. It glows softly, like an ember in the rain. And in that glow, you remember what it means to feel." Tomorrow, I cross the sea again to Hong Kong, a city that balances between stories and storms, freedoms and forces. But tonight, I fall asleep in a room with a paper lantern flickering by the window. My wish still dancing in the air. Day 9, Hong Kong, the city on edge. 9th January 2030. Hong Kong, sir. China, the flight from Taipei to Hong Kong took less than 2 hours, but the arrival felt like stepping into a tense symphony of neon and nerves. As we descended over Victoria Harbour, I saw the skyline pierce the mist, glass, steel, and shadow. Ferries still moved in quiet rhythm across the water. But the atmosphere was heavy, as if the city was holding its breath. Hong Kong, in 2030, was still beautiful, still proud, but different. At the airport, I noticed subtle changes. Facial recognition gates now doubled as security scans. Public signs displayed QR codes for citizen updates, and political murals, once seen in the city, had been replaced by neutral digital art. Still, the spirit that had once sparked massive protests had not disappeared, it had simply gone underground. I took the airport express into Central, where the skyscrapers reached into a low grey sky. At street level, I passed silent queues at bubble tea shops and hurried office goers tapping away on translucent screens. AI assistants rolled beside them, carrying groceries or children's school bags. Life, somehow, had adapted. Yet as I walked deeper into the city, I sensed a quieter resistance. A young journalist named Wen, who agreed to meet me anonymously, guided me to a hidden art gallery in Shungwan. "We document memory," he said. Inside were digital installations showing moments from Hong Kong's past, time-lapse protests, fading newspaper headlines, even a recreated umbrella movement zone rendered in BR. "The city doesn't forget," Wen told me, "even if the outside world does." I left that gallery with a lump in my throat. Later, at Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, I met a team working on AI ethics and decentralized internet models. They were passionate, visionary young minds committed to ensuring that technology never becomes another chain. One student said, "The future is coded, yes, but the code must carry conscience." In contrast, Kowloon was bursting with life. Night markets lit up with steam, spices, and sounds. I wandered through Temple Street, where fortune tellers, opera singers, and gamers shared narrow alleys. I bought a bowl of fishball noodles from an old woman who had lived through British rule, the handover, and the current shifts. We were always in the middle, she said. But in the middle, we learned to balance. That night, I stood at Victoria Peak, looking down at the city that glittered like a galaxy beneath my feet. But beneath that shine, I saw a struggle, a dance between survival and identity, between control and creativity. In my journal, I wrote, Hong Kong stands like a lantern on the edge of a storm, fragile but glowing. And in that glow lies defiance, dignity, and the quiet roar of memory. Tomorrow, I board a ferry across the South China Sea to Singapore, where order meets ambition and gardens bloom above skyscrapers. But tonight, I fall asleep listening to the harbor wind, a wind that has seen flags rise and fall, and yet keeps blowing on. Day 10, Singapore, the garden beneath the sky. 10th January 2030, Singapore, the ferry from Hong Kong cut through a soft morning sea, and by afternoon, I arrived in Singapore, a city that always feels like the future polished and trimmed with precision. From the moment I stepped onto Marina Bay Pier, the air changed, less chaotic, more measured. The skyline shimmered under a cloudless sky, its outlines drawn with geometry and ambition. Gardens curled upward along glass buildings, and drones hummed overhead like metallic birds. It wasn't just a city. It was a living exhibit of possibility. My first stop was the gardens by the bay, still stunning after all these years, but now even smarter. The super trees, once just vertical gardens, now functioned as solar bioprocessors, powering nearby neighborhoods and filtering air pollutants. I stood beneath their metallic canopies, watching vines coil up like green dancers toward the sunlight. A young guide named Lakshmi explained, every flower here is connected to a data node. The garden tells us how it feels. This blend of nature and nanologic struck me deeply. It wasn't man versus nature anymore. It was man with nature, carefully balanced. Later, I visited Fusionopolis, a hub for biotech and AI research. There, I was shown an AI program called Empathica, designed to understand emotional cues in human speech and assist those with mental health challenges. It listens better than many people, said Dr. Tan, the lead developer. But we're still teaching it how to truly care. We walked past labs where robotic surgeons trained alongside humans using holographic patients. At another corner, students developed autonomous ocean drones to monitor coral bleaching across the region. In the evening, I explored Little India, where the scent of cardamom and jasmine lingered in the humid air. Tamil songs played from corner stalls, and families gathered at roadside eateries. Even in this gleaming future city, the past held strong roots. I had a thali meal served on a banana leaf by a smiling man from Madurai who said, Singapore gave us rules, but also space to dream. His daughter, sitting beside him, spoke fluent Mandarin and English while learning AI programming in school. As night fell, I found myself at the iconic Marina Bay Sands Sky Park, gazing over a city so ordered, yet full of soul. Below me, the Singapore River snaked past colonial buildings, glowing boats, and moonlit bridges. I wrote in my journal, Singapore blooms with restraint. Its strength lies not in dominance, but in design, nature on a leash, technology with a conscience. It is not just smart, it is thoughtful. Tomorrow, I fly to Jakarta, messier, vaster, but no less alive. But tonight, under the glass and greenery of this island city, I sleep with Thatte, hum of a nation that learned how to grow upward without losing its roots. Day 11. Jakarta, Islands of Hope and Heat. 11th January 2030. Jakarta, Indonesia. The early morning flight from Singapore to Jakarta took just under 2 hours, but the transition was dramatic, from structured serenity to a storm of motion, sound, and sensation. Jakarta greeted me with heat that clung to the skin, tangled traffic that moved like a living organism, and streets filled with voices, laughing, bargaining, singing. The city, sprawling and stubborn, felt like a patchwork of contradictions stitched together by resilience. I took a small electric cab through the streets of central Jakarta. Children chased kites across rooftops, and vendors balanced towers of rambutan and durian on scooters. From above, the skyline sparkled with steel and glass, but on the ground, I could see the faces behind the glass. Farmers, migrants, shopkeepers, coders, all coexisting in this urban island amid 1,000 literal ones. My first stop was Kota Tua, the old town. Colonial Dutch buildings still stood, their paint peeling, their walls whispering stories of spice routes and rebellion. A young artist named Adita showed me her open studio in a narrow alley. "We paint our present over our past," she said, gesturing to a mural of a girl holding both a phone and a fishing net. "We are not erasing history. We are learning how to walk through it." From there, I rode the newly expanded Jakarta MRT to the Green Reclamation Zone, where the city's battle with climate change was being waged 1 meter at a time. Once swallowed by rising tides, these neighborhoods were now protected by artificial mangrove barriers and floating solar gardens. Engineers explained how water sensors, weather prediction AI, and aquaponics were redefining survival in a drowning world. Despite these efforts, the challenges were massive. I passed neighborhoods still knee-deep in floodwater, families rebuilding after yet another storm. But even here, I saw hope dressed in humility, children learning with waterproof tablets in community schools powered by rooftop panels. At Jakarta Smart City HQ, a young coder named Rafi showed me their AI-powered disaster response system. Indonesia has volcanoes, earthquakes, floods, chaos is part of life, he said. But we train our machines to stay calm so our people can keep going. In the evening, I boarded a small boat to sail around the 1,000 islands, a shimmering chain of coral-fringed gems off the coast. As the city lights faded behind us, the stars came out, fierce and fearless above the dark water. I wrote in my journal, "Jakarta is not polished like its neighbors. It spills over, leaks, and breathes. But it breathes with faith. Here, technology is not for comfort, it's for survival. And survival here feels heroic. Tomorrow, I fly across the Indian Ocean to Perth, where the edges of Asia give way to the beginning of a continent vast and alone. But tonight, I drift asleep on a rooftop in North Jakarta, a fan whirring above, voices singing somewhere below. The heat remains. So does the hope. Day 12, Perth, where the earth begins again. 12 January 2030, Perth, Australia. I woke before dawn in Jakarta to catch the flight that would carry me southwest, across the Indian Ocean, across cultures, languages, and landscapes to Australia's quite western frontier, Perth. As the plane descended, I could see nothing but red earth, winding rivers, and scrublands stretching endlessly toward the horizon. And then, suddenly, a city appeared, crisp and white, hugging the Swan River like a secret kept by the coast. Perth felt immense and intimate at once. The streets were broad, the skies were bold, and the air, cleaner than any I had breathed so far, smelled of eucalyptus and salt. I began the day at Kings Park, one of the largest inner-city parks in the world. From its heights, I looked over a city that whispered more than it shouted. A young Aboriginal guide named Marley greeted me beneath a towering boab tree. She placed a hand on its trunk and said, "This land listens, if you're patient enough." She spoke of her ancestors, the Noongar people, who read the stars not for direction, but for meaning. She led me along the Budja Naning walk, explaining how every plant had a purpose: medicine, food, spirit. Later, I visited a research facility on the outskirts of the city called the Edge Lab, where scientists were exploring AI in conservation. One team used drone swarms and satellite imaging to track bushfires before they could spread. Another project focused on AI-trained kangaroo detectors, machines that helped prevent road accidents without harming the animals. "This land doesn't need taming," said Dr. Ashwin, a climate ecologist. "It needs understanding. That's what technology should do. Listen first, act later." By afternoon, I was standing at Cottesloe Beach, where the ocean stretched like a sheet of mercury under the sun. Surfers rode waves like dancers in communion with the sea. A child ran barefoot with a bucket full of seashells, her laughter carried by the wind. I joined a local community group for a beach cleanup. They weren't environmentalists by label, just regular citizens, students, retirees, fishermen, who saw the ocean as both playground and prayer. That evening, I watched the sun drop into the Indian Ocean from a high bluff, the sky blazing orange, then pink, then purple. Perth doesn't rush. It invites you to slow down, to stand still, to absorb. I wrote in my journal, if Jakarta is the struggle to stay afloat, Perth is the reminder to breathe. It is the pause between continents, the page break in a long chapter. Here, the earth does not roar, it remembers. Tomorrow, I take a cross-country train, the Indian Pacific, eastward, across the wild heart of this great island continent towards Sydney. But tonight, I sleep under white skies, the Southern Cross above me, and the echo of Marley's voice in my mind. This land listens. So should we. Day 13, the Indian Pacific, through the spine of silence, 13 January 2030, aboard the Indian Pacific train, Australia, there are journeys made by air, and then there are journeys made by soul. Today, I boarded the Indian Pacific, the transcontinental train that cuts across Australia's massive spine, linking Perth to Sydney, a 4,000-kilometer pilgrimage through time, stone, and silence. From the platform in East Perth, the silver train stretched like a sleeping serpent. Its windows reflected morning sun, and, in them, I saw my own face, worn from miles, yet wide-eyed like a boy again. I stepped aboard, greeted by warm smiles and wood-paneled interiors that smelled of polished mahogany and memories. The whistle blew at exactly 10 o'clock a.m. As we left the city behind, the urban outlines gave way to umber plains and red earth, dotted with ghost gum trees and rock outcrops that looked ancient even from afar. It wasn't long before the Wi-Fi dropped, the phone lost signal, and all that remained was landscape and thought. In the dining car, I met Clara, a poet from Melbourne, traveling east to collect fragments of silence for her next book. "You don't see Australia from the sky," she said, sipping bush tea. "You feel it from the rails." By midday, we were gliding through the Nullarbor Plain, an unbroken stretch of treeless desert haunting in its beauty. I stepped into the viewing car and stood in silence as the train passed the longest straight stretch of railway track in the world, 478 kilometers without a single curve. There was something spiritual in this nothingness. No billboards, no towers, no traffic. Just red soil, blue sky, and the hum of steel on track. We stopped at Cook, a ghost town once built to service steam engines, now home to only 4 people. I wandered past empty houses, a crumbling school, and a sign that read, "If you are not a train, you are lost." And yet, in this desolation, I felt strangely found. Inside the train, I sat beside a retired geologist who spoke of the rocks we passed as if they were old friends, explaining how some dated back to billion years, formed when Australia was still part of Gondwana. He showed me pictures of opal veins and fossilized fern prints, and said, beneath every inch of this land lies a story too patient for most ears. Dinner was served at dusk, a plate of kangaroo tail stew and bush tomato salad. As I ate, the sun dipped low, setting the sky ablaze. A young violinist played soft music in the lounge, and the rhythm of the train became a lullaby of steel and memory. I wrote in my journal, "Today, I did not move quickly. I moved deeply." The world does not always ask us to speed up. Sometimes, it begs us to be still and let the land speak. Tomorrow, I arrive in Sydney, a city that sits like a pearl on the edge of the ocean. But tonight, I lie in my cabin, rocked gently by the train, under a ceiling of starlight more vivid than any screen. This is not a passage through geography. It is a passage through presence. Day 14, Sydney, where Earth meets Art. 14 January 2030, Sydney, Australia. I woke to the whisper of waves, though I was still on the train. Through the cabin window, The blue line of the Pacific shimmered under a soft morning sun. After 2 full days of desert and dust, Sydney appeared like a poem written in glass and green. As the Indian Pacific rolled into Central Station, I felt an odd mix of exhaustion and renewal, like the earth had breathed through me for the past 4,000 kilometers. Now, I stepped onto solid ground once more, into a city that feels like the future, yet wears its history just beneath the skin. I checked into a modest guest house near the rocks, where old cobblestone lanes meet modern cafes and colonial pubs stand beside Aboriginal art galleries. My room overlooked the harbour bridge, and I could just glimpse the white sails of the Sydney Opera House beyond. My first stop, naturally, was the Opera House itself. As I stood beneath its sweeping curves, shells, sails, or wings, depending on the light, I listened to a tour guide recount how Danish architect J.R.N. Utzon had imagined this masterpiece not as a building, but as a living sculpture rising from the sea. Inside, I attended a short AI-driven multimedia performance, a collaboration between human dancers and machine-generated projections. A blend of Aboriginal didgeridoos, orchestral crescendos, and holographic sea creatures spun across the stage. It wasn't just a show, it was a conversation between time and technology. Later, I walked to Barangaru Reserve, a former container terminal now transformed into a green headland, where native plants have reclaimed the soil. Here, I met a group of students from the University of Sydney studying urban ecology. One of them, a passionate young woman named Aisha, explained how AI-powered environmental sensors are helping monitor sea levels, air quality, and microclimate changes in real time. This city knows it sits on a knife's edge between beauty and fragility, she said. We're learning to live with both. In the afternoon, I boarded a ferry to Manly Beach. The ride itself was a gift. Pelicans gliding past, seagulls swooping, children waving from the decks. The Opera House grew small behind me, like a dream I could revisit anytime. On Manly Beach, I dipped my feet into the cold Pacific, watching surfers chase perfect arcs of water. The sand was soft, golden, and filled with laughter. A street performer played a didgeridoo alongside a looping SYNTH beat, old and new, harmony and rhythm. As the sun set behind the skyline, I returned to Circular Quay. Sydney lit up, its towers reflecting in the harbour like vertical candles. I walked along the promenade, my heart filled with something I couldn't quite name. I wrote in my journal, Sydney doesn't just blend nature and art, it makes them inseparable. Here, the waves paint, the buildings sing, and the people, they live like creators, not consumers. Tonight, I sleep where sky meets sea in a city of salt and steel. Tomorrow, I board a flight across the Tasman Sea towards the myth and mist of New Zealand. Day 15. Queenstown, land of sky mirrors and stone giants, 15 January 2030. Queenstown, New Zealand. Flying into Queenstown is like falling into a fantasy. As the plane dipped below the clouds, a panorama unfolded that seemed too majestic for reality. Glacial lakes like polished mirrors, mountain peaks carved by ancient winds, and valleys so green they made the sky jealous. The pilot announced the descent into Frankton Airport, nestled tightly between the Remarkable's mountain range and the serene Lake Vaktipu. Even the airport seemed to bow before nature here. I stepped off the plane and inhaled air so crisp and clean, it felt medicinal. A kind local taxi driver named Mona welcomed me with a grin. "First time in Queenstown?" she asked. "This place doesn't just take your breath away, it keeps it." We wound along the lake's edge to my hillside lodge, a place built with timber, stone, and silence. From the balcony, I could see the entire town, a charming collection of roofs tucked into the basin, surrounded by ancient mountains like a hidden temple of the earth. After settling in, I took a cable car up to Bob's Peak. The view from the top was staggering. Lake Vaktipu shaped like a lightning bolt, coiled around green arms of land, with the jagged Remarkables rising behind like frozen thunder. Queenstown is known as the adventure capital of the world, but today I was here not for bungee jumps or jet boats, but for something deeper. I had arranged a day with NGI Tahu guides, the Mori guardians of this land. TNE, a broad-shouldered man with kind eyes, led our small group into the forest at Paradise Valley, near Glenorchy. As we walked under canopies of ancient beech trees, he told stories of Papatu Yanuku, the Earth Mother, and Ranginui, the Sky Father. "We don't own this land," he said. "We carry it, like you'd carry your grandparents on your back." At a riverside clearing, we paused for a Mori haka, not as a tourist show, but a sacred invocation of ancestors. I stood quietly, humbled. Every word, every stomp of their feet echoed not just through the valley, but through my own chest. Later, we shared a meal by a fire: kumara, sweet potato, steamed fish, and herbal tea. TNE showed me how AI is being used to preserve Mori oral traditions, turning chants into audio archives and using speech recognition to teach future generations their endangered language. "Even our legends can live in the cloud now," he said, smiling. "As long as our hearts remain rooted in the soil." That evening, I returned to my lodge just as a southern hemisphere twilight painted the sky in hues of deep lavender. I watched the stars emerge, bolder and clearer here than almost anywhere else I've been. No big cities, no noise, just cosmic silence. I wrote in my journal, "Queenstown is not just a place. It is a memory of the planet before ambition. A whisper from a time when Earth was untouched and gods walked freely. Tomorrow, I leave these sacred hills and fly eastward towards South America, towards Santiago, Chile, where fire meets and stone. But tonight, in this land of sky mirrors and stone giants, I sleep beneath stars old enough to remember when we first looked up." Day 16, Santiago, between vineyards and volcanoes. 16 January 2030, Santiago, Chile. From the snow-kissed serenity of Queenstown, I crossed the Pacific in one long, quiet arc, 12 hours of sky and thought, before landing in the jagged embrace of the Andes Mountains. Santiago appeared like a flicker in the ball of stone and light. A city that glimmers but never shouts, tucked between rising fire and green wine. As the plane descended, the view was surreal. Volcanoes to the north, their peaks smeared with snow, and to the west, the vast Pacific waiting like a patient god. The city itself sparkled under the soft touch of the morning sun. I checked into a small Art Deco hotel in the Bella Vista district, where murals bloom on every corner and poetry lingers on cafe napkins. The room smelled of old wood and Chilean rose oil, and through the window, I could see the faint line of Cerro San Cristobal rising gently behind the cityscape. Eager to stretch my legs, I wandered through the Plaza de Armas, the historic heart of Santiago. Children chased pigeons while violinists played Vivaldi in front of the Metropolitan Cathedral, its stone exterior bathed in golden dust. The plaza was framed by history but pulsing with present-day rhythm. At noon, I met Dr. Isidora Fuentes, an environmental scientist and winemaker, for a special visit to her family's vineyard in Mapo Valley, just outside the city. We drove past sun-drenched fields and adobe villages through corridors of vines that seemed to stretch forever. The vineyard itself was centuries old, a blend of tradition and transformation. We now use AI to analyze everything, Isidora said, pointing to a slim sensor buried in the soil. Moisture, microbe health, even leaf pigmentation. It helps us know exactly when to harvest. Science in service of soul. I tasted the first sip of their signature Carmenere, a red wine once thought extinct, rediscovered in Chile. Its flavor was deep, earthy, with a hint of smoke like the memory of fire. We talked of sustainability, climate change, and how the younger generation of Chilean winemakers are combining ancestral agricultural practices with machine learning to predict frost patterns and drought resilience. As evening approached, I returned to the city and took a funicular up Cerro San Cristobal. From the summit, Santiago revealed its full face. Rivers, highways, cathedrals, shantytowns, and skyscrapers all woven into one restless dream. I lingered beneath the towering statue of the Virgin Mary as the city lights began to bloom below. To the east, the ants turned rose gold, glowing like the backs of sleeping dragons. In my journal, I wrote, Santiago is a city on a fault line, not just of geology, but of time. It quivers between past and future, passion and patience, vineyard and volcano. As I descended the hill under a sky awash with stars, the scent of grilled street corn and distant guitars filled the air. Tomorrow, I journey onward, across the Andes and into Buenos Aires, where memory becomes music. But tonight, in this land cradled by grapes and granite, I fall asleep dreaming of molten earth and fermented light. Day 17, Buenos Aires, Tango of Time, 17 January 2030, Buenos Aires, Argentina. The flight from Santiago to Buenos Aires felt like slipping through a seam in the continent, crossing the mighty Andes Mountains, the jagged spine of South America, before descending into the wide, beating heart of Argentina. Buenos Aires unfolded beneath me like a fan of stories. Elegant, chaotic, mournful, alive. The first breath of Buenos Aires is always the same. A hint of roasted coffee, diesel, rain-washed cobblestones, and something inexplicably sweet, perhaps nostalgia itself. I checked into a restored 19th century building in San Telmo, the city's oldest neighborhood, where wrought iron balconies lean forward like old women sharing gossip. The walls here don't whisper, they sing. Murals, tangos, protests, and poems all overlapping in a fierce, beautiful graffiti of culture. After breakfast, medialunas and strong, dark coffee, I wandered the Avenida de Mayo, passing Teatro Colon, bookstores stacked to the ceiling, and kiosks selling philosophy alongside political tabloids. Buenos Aires breathes through its people. In the Café Tortoni, I met Lorenzo, a retired history professor who now teaches Argentine history through tango. Each step, he said, is a memory. Every turn, a decision we once made as a people. That afternoon, he took me to a milonga, a local tango gathering in an old warehouse in La Boca, the barrio of blue walls, red windows, and souls that refuse to stay silent. Here, young and old dancers moved in a silent dialogue, hearts pressed together in rhythms passed down over centuries. Tango is not a dance, I realized. It's an act of survival, a way for the forgotten to speak, for the lonely to connect, for the grieving to breathe. Later, I visited El Ateneo Grand Splendid, once a grand theatre, now a bookstore cathedral. Beneath golden frescoes and velvet curtains, shelves brimmed with Borges, Cortázar, and Neruda. A young girl read a book on AI in Spanish, her school bag full of digital dreams. At sunset, I strolled the banks of Puerto Madero, the city's sleek, modern face. Towers of glass and chrome stood where once there were warehouses. Yet even here, beneath tech startups and eco-friendly cafes, you could hear the muffled beat of a bandoneon drifting through the evening air. That night, I met a group of tech entrepreneurs, young Argentinians building neural networks to translate indigenous languages, restoring the voices of dying dialects from Patagonia and the north. One of them, Valeria, said, "We lost a lot during the dirty wars. Now, we're reclaiming our soul, bit by bit, code by code." I wrote in my journal, Buenos Aires is not just a city. It is an epic of longing, danced on cobblestones, written in the margins of books, and whispered into cups of mate. Tomorrow, I fly north to Rio de Janeiro, where music meets mountain and the divine wears sequins. But tonight, in this city of aching rhythm and timeless rebellion, I feel more than a traveler. I feel like a note in a song still being written.